April 11th, 1983. Music Building, Queens, New York. Dave Mustaine wakes up hungover and finds James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, and Cliff Burton, the other three guys in Metallica, standing over him. Not how you want to start a Monday.
I was sitting in the back of James's pickup when they drove me to the bus station, and I looked at James, and he was weeping.
You know, we were brothers up to that point, and then something had pulled us apart, and we knew it had to continue that way, so it was emotional for all of us.
Hetfield tells him he's out of the band. No warning, no second chance. Bags already packed. Mustaine asks what time his flight is. There is no flight. There is a Greyhound ticket. Los Angeles. Port Authority bus station. Hetfield will personally drive him there. The bus ride takes 4 days. 4 days on a Greyhound. Getting fired from the band you helped start. Now, everybody in this band drank. All of them. They called themselves Alcoholica, and they weren't joking. This was not a band that went home after the show and had a glass of wine. This was a full-time commitment. Dave fit right in, except for one thing. When the others got drunk, they got loud and stupid and had a great time. When Dave got drunk, he got mean, volatile, the kind of drunk where something's coming and you don't know what direction it's arriving from. Mustaine has said this about himself. He drank, he got combative, and he often didn't remember it the next morning. Scott Ian from Anthrax was around this whole scene constantly. Anthrax and Metallica ran in the same circles, shared the same rehearsal buildings, and knew the same people. His read from his memoir, they all drank. Dave drank more. But the difference wasn't the quantity, it was where he ended up. The incidents piled up. There was the night Dave's dog scratched Ron McGovney's car at rehearsal. McGovney was Metallica's original bass player before Cliff Burton. Hetfield kicked the dog. Mustaine attacked Hetfield and McGovney, went after Ulrich verbally, and the band fired him on the spot. He came back the next morning and talked his way back in. Of course he did. Then there was the night Dave poured beer directly into McGovney's bass, right into the pickups. The amp was on. McGovney touched the strings and got an electric shock. Not great bandmate behavior. And Scott Ian says Mustaine used to dump piles of garbage in front of other bands' rehearsal room doors at 2 in the morning, just to watch them show up the next day and deal with it. No reason, no feud, he just thought it was funny. The band kept absorbing it because the riffs were real and the songs were real, so they kept walking back toward it. Then, April 9th, 2 days before the firing, a club called L'Amour in Brooklyn. Metallica was on the bill. So were Vandenberg, a Dutch rock band with Adrian Vandenberg on guitar, and a New York band called The Rods. Scott Ian was there. He watched Mustaine show up drunk to soundcheck and start screaming at Vandenberg that they sucked, that they should get off the stage, in front of the whole room. Ian said later that was the moment the math shifted. What happened next, he said, was executed like a military operation. Here's what Dave didn't know. 10 days before he woke up hungover in Queens, April 1st, April Fool's Day, which is a great detail, Metallica sound engineer Mark Whitaker was already working the phones. He called Kirk Hammett in San Francisco. Hammett played guitar for Exodus, another Bay Area metal band. Everybody knew everybody in this scene. Hammett was sitting on the toilet when the phone rang. Perfect place to get a life-changing phone call. Whitaker asked if he wanted to audition for Metallica. Hammett said, "Yeah, right," and hung up. Whitaker called back. No, this was real. Hammett asked why they were replacing Mustaine. Whitaker told him Dave's tone sucked, his playing was a problem, and he was a drunk. Then they overnighted Kirk the No Life to Leather demo, Metallica's tape, packed with the songs they were already playing live. Hammett knew most of them because everybody in that scene knew those songs. He learned the rest in a week. Then, he packed his amp into cardboard boxes, wrapped it in towels and duct tape because that's how you protect a Marshall head when you're 20 years old and completely broke. Bought a ticket to Newark and flew east. First time he had ever left California. Big week for Kirk Hammett. And on the morning of April 11th, while Hetfield, Ulrich, and Burton were standing over Dave Mustaine in Queens, Kirk Hammett was landing at Newark Airport. Same day, same city. Metallica was not trying to figure out what came next. They had already figured it out.
We're gonna turn it over now to the newest member, Mr. Kirk Hammett. He's gonna melt your face with his guitar.
Hetfield told Mustaine he was gone. 1 bag, 1 ticket, 1 hour. Then he drove Dave from Queens to Port Authority, 42nd Street and 8th Avenue in Manhattan, dropped him at the curb, and watched the bus pull away. Once Dave was gone, Whitaker brought Kirk to the music building. The first song they played was Seek and Destroy. Hammett hit the solo, and Hetfield knew almost immediately they were going to be fine. Dave was on the bus, Kirk was in the room, Metallica was already back to work. All of it happened inside the same Monday morning. Somewhere on that 4-day Greyhound ride west, fired, replaced, and carrying everything he owned in 1 bag, Mustaine picked up a political pamphlet. 4 days is a long time to sit with something like this. No phone, no band, no chance to storm back into the room and argue his way out of it like he had before. Just Dave, the highway, and the same thought running through his head over and over. They had replaced him before they even told him he was gone. He started reading the pamphlet, then flipped it over and began writing on the back. Ideas, lyrics, anything that could keep his brain moving while the bus kept dragging him toward Los Angeles. Then one line grabbed him. The arsenal of Megadeth can't be rid, no matter what the peace treaties come to. He circled the word. The story goes, that was the moment he named his band. Half of that is true. In his own book, Dave credits a singer named Lor Kane. 40 years later, guitarist Greg Handovit says no. He wrote it out as one word, dropped the A, and handed it to Dave. 3 men, 1 word. Nobody agrees. And while Dave was riding home trying to figure out what was left, Metallica kept moving. Kirk Hammett was in the room. The songs were ready, and by July 25th, 1983, barely 3 months after the Greyhound, Kill 'Em All was sitting in record stores, and Dave Mustaine was all over it. The Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire, Phantom Lord, Metal Militia. He had writing credits on all 4. Those were his riffs, his arrangements, and pieces of the band he had helped build, now coming through the speakers with somebody else playing lead guitar. Imagine getting kicked out, sent across the country on a bus, and then hearing your own work introduce the band to the world without you standing there. That'll keep a man motivated. Dave didn't have an album. He didn't have a record deal. At that moment, he didn't even have another band, but he had a target.
Don't really like Kirk because he got my job, but I nailed his girlfriend before I left. So.
He wanted to build something faster, heavier, and dangerous enough that nobody would ever talk about him as the guitarist Metallica threw away. Metallica kept the music. Dave just got paid in bus fare.
What do you think of Dave Mustaine and his success with Megadeth, and are y'all still friends?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird for a while because, there was a lot of weird things going on in the press between us and Mustaine for a couple of years, and I think that it was just, Dave was kind of bitter. I mean, it wasn't like the sweetest of breakups, and, but he has a great band, and he's made some records that I really like.